This is Frankie Long. Uh, this is my PowerPoint presentation for Action Research. Uh, my topic was the effect of socioeconomic status on the achievement gap. Slide 1, which is the introduction. The achievement gap is just the disparity between the academic achievement of poorer students and then the more affluent students. Okay, about 1/4 of the people in this country are minors, and about 40% of those minors are considered low income. Okay, so my lit review paper looked at several aspects. The first being the challenges of the physical environment. When a child lives in a poor neighborhood, they're more likely to encounter crime, drugs, just poor attitudes about education. The neighborhood may be dangerous. They may have to worry about gang violence. Okay, and the social environment of the student may be bad as well. By that I mean that they may live in a rundown house or apartment. They may not have clean water. There may be mold. The place may not be up to code. And the households generally will not have many books or educational resources such as encyclopedias or the internet or a computer on which they can type and do their schoolwork. And many of these homes can be single parent homes, or they can live with grandparents, aunts and uncles. Okay, it's just more likely in this situation. Okay, my lit review looks at the research on SES's effect on achievement, and it has been shown that there is a correlation between SES and achievement. Okay, we look at the research on academic accountability and its effect on the achievement gap. And finally, we look at narrowing the achievement gap, which is something that my research tried to do. Moving on to methodology. Okay, I know there's a lot of stuff on this slide. I was at a small private school that was K through 8. It was an Episcopal school. It was somewhat expensive. Of course, that's going to be expensive in comparison to public school, but they did offer need-based financial aid to those who qualified. Okay, there was less than 200 students at the school. I student taught in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I taught social studies. I had anywhere from 9 to 10 students in each class. I had 9 in all 3, and then I actually gained 1 in one of the classes. Now, the 6th and 7th grade classes were evenly divided by gender, pretty much, and then the 8th grade class actually had 7 male students and 2 female students. So the gender issue played a little more prominently in the 8th grade class. So, from day one, I observed and I took notes on behavior. I tried to do as much just observing as I possibly could. Now, I didn't attempt any interventions or anything at this point. I was just observing. Once my IRB came through, I began making interventions. But before that, I had identified 3 subjects who came from low-income families and attended the school on the need-based grants that were offered. They were low achievers, and there was one from each grade, one from 6th, one from 7th, and one from 8th. Okay, once I got my RB approval, I began to start doing my action research. Okay, I used the best practices that are outlined in the lit review paper for the final 3 weeks of my placement. Okay, when I got there, all 3 students displayed behavioral issues that were just not good for their academic environment and their academic success. Okay, they all tended to have self-deprecating humor and behavior. They would constantly put themselves down, which one thing I noticed was it was like they were trying to beat their classmates to the punch when it come to putting themselves down. But they all had very negative attitudes about school, about schoolwork, about the environment in general. They would get up, all 3 of them would get up and move around the class constantly, whether that be to get up to go to the bathroom, just to get up and walk around. Several times they would get up and go get tissues from the teacher's desk at the front of the room. But they would just constantly get out of their seats. Okay, now, I think their regular classroom teachers had kind of began to get a little bit fed up with their behavior, and they had basically just started to ignore them. And it seemed to me that exacerbated the problem. The kids, they weren't having to put any effort into anything. Nothing was expected from them. But when I took over teaching, I began to make their assignments more rigorous. I let them know from the start that I expected more from them. I encouraged them. I complimented how smart they were. These kids were not dumb. They were very bright kids. They were not being challenged near enough. Once I gave them more rigorous work and let them know how much I expected from them, their behavior started to improve greatly. I would always give them positive feedback. If they misbehaved, I wouldn't call them down. I wouldn't yell at them. I wouldn't tell them to shut up. I always stayed very positive with them. If they put themselves down, I would correct them by, saying something positive and encouraging them. One of the things that I did was I created a folder system with a signable assignment sheet that I would send home with them every day, and they would get their parents to sign it and date it, and they would bring it back to me the next day, and I would sign it and date it and put their assignments on it. If I wanted the class to read something, I would write it in that folder, and I would send it home with them, and they would bring it back the next day, and their parents would have signed it saying that they did their assignments. Once I put this system into place, I started to notice a vast change in their academic success. Their quiz grades improved greatly, their test grades improved, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, for 3 weeks, I tried these interventions, and every day I could see a difference in these kids. They went from being kind of the outcast of the class to just being students. Okay, now I kept detailed records through this. Now I'm going to move on to the next slide, but first, I've made up some names. I didn't want to use their real names. My 8th grader, we'll call him Tim. He is actually adopted from a drug addict from Eastern Europe. He was born addicted to drugs, which has contributed to some of his behavioral issues and his learning issues. He now lives with an American family, and they uh, seem to be nice people. Uh, they're not wealthy or anything, but uh, they do get the financial aid to help pay for Tim's school. Okay, my seventh grader is a child named Ian. His parents are going through a nasty divorce. There are serious money issues at home, and they are fighting for custody of him. He goes home with one parent one night and one parent the next night. So he carries his belongings with him all of the time. This kid has had a pretty rough life. Out of the three, he exhibited the most negative behavior. He would constantly say things that worried me and indicated to me that he could be a potential risk for suicide or something like that. But he wound up showing great improvement. He would get up in the middle of class and just walk around. I'm not sure if he was doing it for attention or if he just couldn't sit still. But that problem did improve once I started working with him. Now the sixth grader, we'll call him Nathan. He was a very undersized boy, small for his age, and extremely hyper. He would constantly frustrate his regular classroom teacher. He was also a very bright child, but I would notice him preemptively putting himself down constantly. But again, as with the other two, he improved with my interventions. So let's move on to the results. I hope you can see that. I had to play with colors to find one that you could actually see on the video. Okay, Tim, the 8th grader. Quiz 1 was the first quiz I gave them. That was prior to any interventions. I think that would have been in my 3rd week of my placement. He scored a 36 out of 100 on it. It was a 10-question quiz that each question had multiple parts. So he wound up with a 36 out of 100, which is not good. Okay, he only got about 3.5 questions correct. Now, on quiz 2, which took place the very first week I started doing the interventions, he scored an 83 out of 100, which was about 8.5 questions correct. And once I started working with Tim, his behavior improved, and he would be far more engaged in the lessons than he was previously. He would ask questions, he would take interest in stuff, and by quiz 3, which was in my final week of placement, he scored an 88, which was only 5 points off from an A at their school. He was very happy with the 88. That was the first B he had had since the beginning of the year. Okay, now on test 1 was given in my 2nd week of teaching, and it was over material that was covered by the regular classroom teacher and a very little bit of what I taught. Now, there was no interventions done on it, and he scored 48 out of 100, which is an F. But if you'll notice test 2, he scored 79 out of 100. Test 2 was given on my 3rd to last day, and that had been about 2.5 weeks of interventions, and he went from a 48 to a 79. Okay, now projects. Project 1 was something they did. They had been working on it before I got there. They turned it in my first week there, and Tim just decided not to do his. He wound up with a 0 and got a failing grade. So, but Project 2, which is something I assigned in my 5th week there, the first week I did interventions, he turned it in the last week, which was roughly gave the class roughly 3 weeks to complete their assignment. It was a diorama and a paper to go along with it. And Tim excelled at this. He got a perfect score, and his work was very impressive. Okay, so you can see his grades improve along this timeline here. Ian, the 7th grader, his first quiz was my first week there. He scored a 10 out of 100. And he only got one question right. Second quiz, he scored a 66 out of 100. That quiz took place in the first week of interventions. 66 is still an F, but it is a 56-point improvement. By quiz 3, he has come up to a 79, which is a big improvement over a 10. Now, on his first test, no interventions, he scored a 74. That was a 25-question test, I think. Then on test 2, he had scored an 87, which is a B. He was very excited to get the B. His parents were very excited and actually came in and talked to me. Now, move on to his project. Project 1, he scored a 75, which is a C. I had no involvement with that project. That was one that took place before I got there. Now, the project that I assigned him, or his class rather, was a video project. They all made videos that had to do with ancient Mesoamerican peoples, and he got a 93 out of 100, which was impressive. He did very well with the project. He started working better with his classmates. His negative behavior had all but disappeared, and I was very happy to see him succeed. Okay, now we go to little Nathan, the 6th grader. His first quiz, my first week there, was 50 out of 100. Quiz 2, which was in the first week of interventions, he scored an 81 out of 100, which is a great improvement. Quiz 3 was actually taken on the next to last day of my placement there. He scored an 85, which was a B. Like Ian, he was very excited to get a B. He was used to getting Fs. Okay, his mother was also very happy to see the improvements he was making. His first test I had no involvement with, but it was a 66. His test 2, which was in the last week of my placement, he scored an 80, which is a C, but a C is still an improvement over an F. So I really think the interventions made a huge difference. His project, the 6th grade, what they did was make a family coat of arms and wrote a paper about it. He scored a 73 on it. Now, the second project that his class did, he scored an 85, which is a B, and he was once again extremely happy about it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last slide. Now, the conclusions are, the best practices that I discussed in the LIC review actually worked. Every single one that I tried worked, and the students showed improvement. Just the change in their attitude and self-confidence was amazing. And the behavior issues, the self-deprecating comments, the negative attitudes, they just nearly disappeared. And the getting up and moving around the room constantly just kind of fixed itself with the interventions. And the most successful intervention was the folders that I would send home with them. Just that communication between parent and teacher made all the difference in the world. They completed their assignments, and by completing their assignments, which most of the time was reading, they were able to take part in the class the next day and be successful. And you could really see the difference in their grades. And I'll get more into detail in my actual paper when I turn it in, which will be Tuesday. And I want to thank you, and I hope this video didn't take up too much of your time.